What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, I'm going to take a look at the 6.5 million midfielder bracket to see if there's anyone to consider for your Game Week 1 squads and also who you might want to avoid as well. So if you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget the Fantasy Football Hub have 50% off at the moment. All the links you need to get signed up for that are in the description below. Otherwise, let's jump into it. So the first player I'm going to talk about is Morgan Gibbs-White, who isn't that exciting as an FPL option, but is still worth considering. And he kind of reminds me of that meme that sometimes goes around. I think it says something like it's not much, but it's honest work. I think that describes him as an FPL pick because his open play attacking threat is not that great, right? 0.17 non-penalty expected goals per 90, 0.19 expected assists. That's the not much part. But in terms of the honest work, he always starts. The minutes are great. He's probably on penalties as well. And he's been fairly consistent over the last 2 seasons. If we have a quick look now, he's played almost identical minutes the last 2 seasons. So it's 3,151 minutes in 2022-23. And then last year, it was basically 5 minutes more. And in both seasons, it was 5 goals and 12 assists. So 17 attacking returns for 6.5 million is pretty decent. Now, I know I've mentioned this in other videos on the penalty situation. Chris Wood does have a very good record in general over his career. But Gibbs-White has taken the last 3 for Nottingham Forest over the last 2 seasons. Unfortunately, Chris Wood and Gibbs-White have not been on the pitch at the same time to see exactly what's going to happen. But if Gibbs-White wants to keep them and he's taken the last 3 and scored them, there's no reason why that can't happen. And the fixtures are also pretty good for Nottingham Forest. So Bournemouth at home game week 1, Southampton away game week 2, and Wolves at home game week 3. Liverpool away game week 4 is a bit tougher. If you're building a squad that's got a lot of depth in terms of good options off your bench, you can maybe even bench him in game week 4. Then it's Brighton away. And we're not yet sure how teams like Brighton are going to perform under new manager, but it's not a defence that would necessarily scare me that much. And then it's Fulham at home in game week 6. So I think that's pretty solid. If we look a little bit longer term than that, game week 7 Chelsea away, then you've got Palace at home, Leicester away, West Ham at home, Newcastle at home. So if he starts off really well, and he is performing and being fairly consistent, he might even be a pick that you can keep a little bit longer term. So when you're building your squads and you want those exciting players, Gibbs-White is definitely not the first name that comes to mind. But if you want someone that you don't have to worry about in terms of starts and that is probably on penalties, for 6.5, it's a pretty good price and he's a good option. So next up is Christopher Nkunku, who's got massive potential at this price if he can keep himself fit. And I completely understand why some people are sceptical about that. The injury record is not ideal, especially over the last year. But if he can come through pre-season and is available for game week 1, I just think the attacking returns will come. We saw at RB Leipzig before he got to Chelsea, loads of goals, loads of assists. The underlying numbers last year, albeit in a very small sample size, was 0.51 non-penalty expected goals per 90. If he gets the minutes, he's going to score, he's going to assist. And after Man City at home in game week 1, the fixtures are good for Chelsea. Wolves away, Palace at home, Bournemouth away, West Ham away, and Brighton at home. We haven't yet seen it properly in a Chelsea shirt because obviously all the injuries last year. But if you could guarantee me he's going to play 75 plus minutes in the first 6 games, I think I'd almost lock him into my draft right now. That's how much I rate him, especially at this price of 6.5. And I did take him out of my recent draft, but I said in the video I was just waiting to hear some positivity around the Chelsea account. I didn't even necessarily need him to score or assist. And this is what Maresca said. Nkunku can play everywhere. He can play number 9, winger, attacking midfielder. He's one of the players in these 2 weeks who is doing very, very well. He is taking the way we want to play. That is encouraging. It doesn't mean that he's guaranteed to start. Of course, there might be an injury, other players coming back and stuff like that. But the fact he's versatile, I just don't see how he's not in that Chelsea 11 if he's fit. He's just too good to leave out. And whichever one of those positions he plays, he's going to be a threat. So I really rate him. I don't think he's a lock right now by any means because of that injury record. But if he comes through pre-season, he's going to suddenly be in a lot of drafts. And that 13.6% ownership is going to go high. So Leon Bailey is kind of the opposite to Gibbs-White in that he is quite an exciting FPL pick. The underlying numbers are good and that translated into 10 goals and 11 assists last season. He just doesn't necessarily have those guarantee of minutes. He's also not on penalties either, but I don't think that's a huge consideration for him. If he's going to get regular game time at 6.5, he's a decent option. The thing with Bailey is Diaby's leaving or may have even left Aston Villa by the time you watch this video. And I think that's going to bump Bailey's minutes up as long as he can stay fit. I was looking at last season and he played 35 times. 13 of those were from the bench. So 22 starts. Can he improve on that? I think he can. And with 0.27 non-penalty expected goals, 0.31 expected assists, there's no reason why he can't put out a similar output this season or maybe even go one better. So I really like Leon Bailey as a pick. We need to see Aston Villa a bit more during pre-season to see how they kind of set up. But I think if he's fit, he's going to start quite regularly in those first 6 game weeks. The only slight question marks are maybe the first 2 game weeks, West Ham away and Arsenal at home. I mean, Villa, they're in the Champions League, right? We shouldn't forget that. They were a very good attacking team last year. They will cause that Arsenal defence problems, but it's not a fixture that you would target. And West Ham defence was really poor last year, but now they've got a new manager. Maybe they will sharpen up a bit, and it is an away game. So maybe he's someone that you could wait for a little bit longer. But if you're confident in his minutes, and with the fixtures they've got from game week 3 onwards, it's probably just as good an idea to put him in your team straight away, because you've got Leicester away, Everton at home, Wolves at home, and Ipswich away. So 2 okay home games in 4 and 5, and then 2 newly promoted sides away from home. So I think Leon Bailey's looking pretty good. In terms of trying to rank these players, I should probably do it at the end. I think he's definitely got the potential to outscore Gibbs-White. He's a more exciting pick for sure. He's much more likely to get you a goal from open play. His assist threat is good too. It's just, I just think if you got to like game week 4 or 5 and he suddenly wasn't in the 11 and Emery decides to go for a different setup just for that one game, right, whenever it might be, it wouldn't be like a massive shock because we saw that happen a few times last season. But up until Champions League and stuff like that starts, he's probably going to be fine. So I really like him. It's just those first couple of game weeks are slightly putting me off, but as a longer term pick, I think he looks pretty good. So Garnacho is an interesting one because at the time of recording, he's currently sat in 12.3% of all FPL manager teams, which is similar to Nkunku. It's higher than Bailey, it's higher than Gibbs-White. And yet I feel like he's not really spoken about a huge amount, at least from the people that I follow on Twitter, a couple of the podcasts I've listened to and stuff like that. Especially when he got 30 starts last year and played 36 times in total in the league. It might be that people are expecting lower minutes this year, and I'll talk about that in a minute. It could be that Man United were just terrible and people want to avoid them and see how they get on, and I understand that. But I think there is promise there. His underlying numbers were pretty good last year, 0.29 expected goals per 90, 0.1 expected assists. He's also very young, so you would expect those numbers to improve. And I think even when non-Man United fans look at that Man United squad, like Garnacho is one of those players that stands out that you would expect to see a bit of improvement on over the next couple of years. He is a talent, right? So I think we can see improvement. I think that price tag is good. In terms of the minutes, he was away at Copa America. He only played in the 3rd group game. Otherwise, he was an unused substitute. So it's not like he's been playing loads of minutes like, I don't know, Saka, Palmer, well, maybe not Palmer, but Saka, Foden, etc., right? It's not like that. He will still get the time off that everyone gets when they finish a tournament. But he doesn't strike me as a player that's going to come back super unfit. I think he will be available for game week 1, especially if he gets a few pre-season minutes before that. And we've got to remember last year, there was stages where he was the number 1 winger for Man United, ahead of Marcus Rashford. And I'm not sure Ten Hag would forget that. And he also just played very well. It wasn't a coincidence that he was getting so much game time. There is competition, though. Sancho's there, although there is rumours that he might be sold. If Man United can find a buy. You've got Garnacho, obviously, Diallo, Rashford and Anthony too. But Garnacho played so well last year. I expect when he's fit and available that he probably starts. Will he see reduced minutes and maybe miss the odd game compared to last year? It's definitely possible. And Ten Hag has been talking Amad Diallo up. I think a lot of people mentioned this to me already. And he's 5 million, by the way. Ten Hag said, and this was posted by ESPN UK, we have to see Amad in a different way. Of course he's young, but he's experienced. At the end of the season, he had a very good time. This season has to be the year. Now, that obviously sounds promising, and I expect we will see Amad Diallo play a lot more for Man United this season. But I don't think that necessarily means he's now first choice right winger. But potentially because Garnacho is getting back late to pre-season, Diallo could start game week 1, and that might be reason enough to just go without Garnacho. But I don't think it suddenly means that he's first choice on the right and then it's Garnacho or Rashford on the left. We saw plenty of times Rashford and Garnacho played together. So I think there's promise there. But if you're setting your team up in a I was going to say sensible way, but that's not fair, I don't think. In a way where you want to go for consistent starters that you don't have to worry about, like a Gibbs-White, for example. I'd say Anthony Gordon at 7.5. Garnacho is not the one, but I think if he is available for game week 1, I think there is a good chance he starts. And if he continues to play like he did last year, there's no reason why he'd be taken out of that team. The only thing I would say is maybe he gets subbed a bit earlier, and there is obviously some doubts on the start. So maybe that is the reason people aren't talking about him, and maybe that makes sense. But he's still in a lot of teams. Over 200,000 FPL managers currently own him. I think he's going to do well this season. I'm just not sure I'm confident it's going to be from game week 1. So Brennan Johnson, another player at this price with huge potential if he can get enough minutes in that Spurs team. And I think there's a chance he will at the start of the season. We'll obviously have to keep an eye over pre-season about what transfers they make and stuff like that. And Richarlison has gone on tour with Spurs, but there's rumours that he's not quite fit enough. There's other rumours that he might be sold. And if that happens and Spurs don't bring anyone in, presumably Son will play through the middle, and then Ange Postecoglou needs 2 players to play wide. Kulusevski, Johnson, and Werner would be the main candidates, so there are other ways that he could set up. And I think from the end of last season, Brennan Johnson was definitely the top in terms of pecking order for those wide players, and he can play on the right and the left. And we've also seen him at times, briefly for Spurs, but in the past as well at Nottingham Forest, he can play number 9 as well. So if Ange Postecoglou wanted to mix it up and put someone else through the middle and Son on the left, Brennan Johnson can fulfill that role. So I think depending on transfers that come in, there's a good chance if he's fit, he's going to start in game week 1. And Leicester away is pretty good. Then Everton at home game week 2. It does get a little bit tougher after that. Newcastle away, Arsenal at home, Brentford at home, and Man United away. But from an attacking point of view and the way that Spurs set up to attack, I don't think that's that bad. Right? If you take out the Arsenal game, the first 5 game weeks, they're all right. So I like him. It's just, again, whether or not he's worth taking that risk for, because the underlying numbers are very good. 0.4 XG per 90, 0.17 expected assists. If he gets game time, he is going to get returns. It's just whether or not you go against like a Leon Bailey, who I think right now is going to get pretty good minutes, or a Gibbs-White that's definitely nailed on, and Nkunku, if he's fit, is almost certainly going to play for Chelsea. Is it worth taking that risk? It might be. He's only 1.9% owned. And towards the end of last season, I owned him. He was a bit frustrating because he got a lot of chances and missed them. And I actually think, if you look at the numbers, 0.4 non-penalty XG per 90, the actual goals were 0.19. So he underperformed on goals and overperformed on assists. If you can switch that around, there's a player here that's going to get plenty of FPL points. I don't think, not that I don't think, I wouldn't be confident long-term he's definitely in that team all the time. But I think for game week 1, depending on what happens at pre-season and the initial period of the season, depending on what happens in pre-season, I think for the initial stages of the actual season, he could be pretty good. The only thing I will remind you of is between game weeks 3 and 4, you've got an international break. The transfer window will still be open for the first few weeks of the season as well. So plenty of stuff could happen. But Spurs fans, let me know what you think in the comments below. I'm pretty sure right now with the team and squad you've got, he would be in that side. But I guess if Richarlison stays and he's fit, you've got another attacker to throw into the mix, and so early substitutions could be a thing. So Brennan Johnson is one of those players I really think could do well. I just don't know if he's the kind of player that I would put into my own team. So Mohamed Kudus next for West Ham. And this is a player where I get very conflicted between what I know he can do and what I've seen him do and what the stats tell me. And I know people will say stats aren't everything, you should just ignore them, XG means nothing. I get that. But it is something that I based a lot of my decisions around very heavily. And when a player doesn't have good numbers, that kind of worries me a little bit. So last year, 0.18 expected goals per 90, 0.13 expected assists. Now, at previous clubs in different leagues, he has done better than that. But obviously the step up to the Premier League sometimes is quite big. In terms of actual returns, I'm not sure why my FPL page was missing there, but it's back now. In terms of actual returns last year, it was 8 goals, 9 assists, which is not bad. But that's what, 17 attacking returns? Someone like Garnacho got 14. Leon Bailey beat that as well. So, I don't know, he's a player that everyone rates. And I think he is a bit of a baller, right? I agree with that. But I'm not sure he's like massively ahead of anyone else at this price point. And also for West Ham, the fixtures are fine, but they're not amazing to start the season. Like the first 5 game weeks, 2 away games, Palace and Fulham, and 2 of the 3 home games are Man City and Chelsea. So I think right now, and as always, right, things can change over pre-season. You're allowed to change your mind on and picks and stuff like that, I think I'd rather go elsewhere for this price point and then potentially look to bring him in later on. Like looking at the longer term fixtures for West Ham, from game week 6, it's Brentford away, Ipswich at home. Spurs away and Man United at home are not great, but not terrible. Then Forest away, Everton at home. Like, that's a little bit of a better run of fixtures, I would say. But all the way from like game week 1 to, I don't know, game week 4 up to game week 13, there's never like a really solid run of games. Even when you get like that Ipswich at home, you do then run into Spurs and Man United. Like I said, the Forest game's away from home. Then it's Everton at home. But then it's Newcastle away, Arsenal at home. So, I don't know. I think West Ham will be better this season without David Moyes there and Lopetegui there instead. And maybe that will improve Kudus' output. And look, 17 attacking returns is not bad at all. And the fact that he always plays is a big bonus, right? His minutes were very good last year. But I'm just conflicted, like I said. I think you watch him and you think that's a great play. He's going to get plenty of returns. The stats don't necessarily tell the same story. But he could also just massively improve this year. So he's probably not one for me for game week 1. But I wouldn't be surprised if at some point I own him this season. I'd probably prefer Jarrod Bowen for what it's worth. But there is $1 million price difference. So it's not as easy as that. So when West Ham's fixtures get a bit better, I'll probably go back to this discussion. But for game week 1, probably not for me. So I just want to quickly check the predicted points over on Fantasy Football Hub. As always, links in the description below. Just to see how the players I've spoken about fare and whether it kind of agrees with what I've said. I haven't checked this already, so let's have a quick look. 6 game week range. We'll go to midfielders, and I'll quickly just change it so it only shows 6.5 million midfielders. Maybe I should have done that already. And at the top is Brennan Johnson. Now, I do think he's got massive potential if the minutes are right. So maybe if you agree with that, and he is going to play regularly, looks like a really good option. Then it's Nkunku, similar things there. He just needs the minutes. Then it's Leon Bailey, so really good fixtures for Villa from game week 3 onwards. And then Garnacho. And then in 5th spot is Hwang at Wolves. Now, he could be on penalties, I think, so maybe a good option. And there's some okay fixtures in there. But overall, I don't like Wolves fixtures enough to go for one of their players. But I kind of get why he's in the top 5. Then it's Bernardo Silva. I'm going to speak about Man City midfielders in a minute. I'm not sure I can get behind them for 6.5. And then it's Gibbs-White. So Gibbs-White's actually quite far down, although the gap in points is not massive, probably because of his open play goal threat and stuff like that. But I think with the consistency in minutes and penalties, maybe he should be a bit higher. So that's what the predicted points think over on Hub. Let me know in the comments below if you think differently. And obviously, if you want to sign up, links in the description below. So those first 6 midfielders I've talked about are probably the main players that people are considering for game week 1 at this price point. But there's a ton of other options. So I thought I'd go through the list and discuss whether they should be considered or whether they're just straight up avoids. Now the first player is Declan Rice. And I think for 6.5 he will do really well like he did last year. He always starts. The minutes are good. Even things like getting an extra point for a clean sheet as a midfielder. Those points start to add up when you play for Arsenal when they get as many clean sheets as they do. He's got threat from set pieces. He sometimes takes them as well. And that's why he got 7 goals, 9 assists last year. I would still avoid him, I think. I'm a little bit sceptical about whether or not he can keep up that rate of attacking returns. But also, I just wouldn't want to block an Arsenal spot. Like from game week 6 onwards, it's Leicester at home, Southampton at home, Bournemouth away in the space of 3 game weeks. That's pretty decent fixtures. And if I suddenly wanted to load up on Arsenal players, I don't think Declan Rice would be part of the best 3. So do I want to put myself in a position where I can't get 3 other Arsenal players in? Probably not. So as good as he is at 6.5, I'd rather go elsewhere and then keep those Arsenal spots free. That's maybe less of a consideration than it was last year because the Arsenal players have all gone up in price. It's going to be more difficult to own 3 of them. But I want that option. So Declan Rice will do well, but I still probably won't own him. Diaby is probably leaving or already left by the time this video goes out. Pascal Gross is quite consistent in terms of his output. 4 goals, 11 assists last year, 9 goals, 8 assists the season before. But he might get sold. There's speculation that he's going to leave Brighton. If he doesn't, I'm semi-interested in him because I don't think he would get rotated around the positions as much as he did under De Zerbi. And if he's playing in an attacking role, you know, he has got consistent output over the last couple of seasons. And the fixtures from like game week 4, Ipswich at home, Forest home, are not that bad. The only problem for Brighton is, outside of that, it's like Man United, Arsenal, Chelsea and Spurs. So even so, you're probably avoiding them for game week 1. It's the same for March and Matoma. Like if those two can prove their fitness in pre-season, like March is still flagged. Not due back till September, so we can ignore him. Mitoma, if he proves himself in pre-season, could be an option, but the fixtures just probably aren't there. Madueke and Mudryk, I just wouldn't go near. It's Nkunku for me. Maybe Sterling if he gets regular game time, but he's 7 million. A few people have mentioned that either McAllister or Szoboszlai could play advanced for Liverpool. If that happens and we see it regularly, yes, I'm interested, especially with the fixtures they've got. I need to see that set up in pre-season to go anywhere near them, though. Man City, Rodri falls into a similar spot to Declan Rice. I just would not want to take up a Man City spot with him. Like Haaland could well end up being in my draft. I might go for Vardio. Do I want Rodri to be the third player? Probably not, right? What if I start with Palmer or Saka and Foden's looking great? I want to be able to get him in one move. I don't want to put Rodri in. So he's not an option for me. And then the others like Bernardo, Doku, Grealish, and even Savio, who they've just signed as well, it's just too much potential rotation. The problem for me, it's always the same with Pep Guardiola and Man City. If you've watched my videos for a while, we've had this discussion many times. Whoever plays regularly will get good goals and assists. Who's that going to be? I don't know. It could be that because Grealish is fresh, had summer off, he starts the beginning of the season. How long will that last? I just don't know. And if De Bruyne doesn't go, he can play central. Bernardo can play there as well. Foden can play wide. So can Grealish, Doku. It's just too much of a worry for me. And even like someone like Bernardo Silva, if I just order the 6.5s by points per match, Bernardo Silva is 4th on the list at that price point or below with 4.3, same as Rice. I still just don't want to take up a spot with him for Man City. I want the option to go elsewhere. So I could get tempted the closer we get to game week 1, but I'd have to be pretty confident that my Man City player is still going to be playing for Ipswich and West Ham and Brentford. Bearing in mind, Brentford in game week 4 is after the international break. It's the 14th of September. By that point, everyone's going to be back. I just don't need the headache. They're not that good to the point where I'm not better off just buying someone that's consistently going to start. I wish I'd get more excited about Man City players at that price point, but I just can't. Garnacho we've spoken about. Mason Mount and Sancho are just too risky for minutes. Harvey Barnes, maybe. If it's like a Barnes, Isak, Gordon front three, that could happen. Maybe Barnes is an option, but again, I need to be more sure about the minutes. Bruno Guimaraes, I would just probably ignore. Probably too defensive. He got 7 goals, 9 assists last year, so he did pretty well. And players like him will always get consistent points over a season as a whole because they always play. But we don't usually buy players for the season as a whole. We're buying them for periods of like 6 to 8 game weeks. And I think when you do that, you can probably get better points from someone else, even though Bruno might outscore them over the course of a season. Gibbs-White we spoke about, Brennan Johnson too. Kulusevski I just don't really rate as a fantasy option. His numbers are just not that great. I know he scored 8 goals last year, but the underlying stats are not good enough. And I'm not sure Werner is ahead of Johnson for minutes. So I probably just wouldn't go there either. Ward-Prowse is definitely a much worse option than Kudus. I mean, potentially if he gets penalties, maybe, but I'm not a fan of Ward-Prowse. Haven't been for a while. And then Hwang and Neto, I really like as options if they're fit, but the fixtures are terrible for Wolves to start the season. So I think the first 6 I spoke about are good. There's other potential options in there, but I need to see a bit more. So most of them for now, for game week 1, would probably be avoid. Out of the first ones I spoke about, I think with the right minutes, Nkunku's my favourite. And then for safety and penalties, it's probably Gibbs-White and then Bailey. I think Brennan Johnson and Garnacho have got absolutely the potential to do really well, and Kudus too. I'm just not sure I trust that completely right now for game week 1. Let me know in the comments below who your favourite 6.5 million midfielder is. Also, let me know what other videos on price points you want to see. Obviously, I could just do one video with all midfielders and forwards, but that gets quite long then, even longer than this one. And I feel like certain price points are quite interesting to discuss, more so than others. Like Palmer, Saka, Haaland and Salah, etc. They're going to come up in lots of videos. 6.5 million midfielders, maybe not quite so much. Anyway, if you enjoyed it, give it a like, hit that subscribe button, rate 5 stars if you listen on podcast. Don't forget to check out Fantasy Football Hub using the links in the description below. And I'll catch you again soon.